Centuries after Earth was reduced to dust and ash, the Zaltiri Dominion returned not for conquest, but curiosity. Their ships hovered like silent gods over the broken planet, scanning for data, relics, and signs of their long-dead enemy, humans. Young Dominion archaeologist Velk landed on the blackened surface in his sleek scout pod, stepping into silence so thick it felt alive. The ruins of once great cities stretched beneath him like bones of a giant animal, cracked and crumbling, whispering stories that had no one left to tell them. Velk was eager, naive perhaps, driven by hunger for knowledge rather than pride. Dominion history spoke of humanity as dangerous, violent, brilliant. It's brilliant. That was why they had been wiped out, or so the archives said. But as Velk wandered through a half-collapsed human military bunker buried deep under the crust, something felt wrong. The walls were marked with scorched handprints and strange symbols. Not war markings, but warnings. He passed the shattered remains of a drone, half melted by time, and reached what looked like a sealed vault door. Dominion scanners confirmed it was powered barely. That shouldn't be possible. Power was impossible on this dead world. Yet, when he pressed his clawed hand to the panel, the vault hissed, lights flickering weakly in the dust. The door creaked open, releasing a breath of air that had not tasted freedom in 300 years. Inside was a pod, covered in dust and old Earth military insignia. Ice frosted its curved window. Velk peered inside and recoiled. A man, a human. Pale skin, muscular frame, deep scars along his arms and jaw. Still alive, preserved by forgotten human technology. His eyes were shut, but his chest moved slow, shallow breaths. Velk activated his comm link, stammering in fear. I found something. Someone. This cannot be humans. Are extinct. Confirmed extinct. No one answered. Static crackled in his earpiece. Before Velk could try again, the pod clicked. Slowly, terrifyingly, it opened. Cold vapor spilled out. The man stirred. His hand moved first, then his head tilted up, and two sharp, ice-blue eyes locked onto Velk. Velk stumbled backward, dropping his scanner. The man sat up fully, bones creaking with age, but strength still in his movements. He looked around, saw the Dominion logos on Velk's suit, and narrowed his eyes like a predator, recognizing an old enemy. Velk tried to speak, to explain, but the man stood. T's voice was gravel, deep and raw from disuse, but steady. This can't be, Velk whispered in shock. We wiped out humans centuries ago. Okay? The man took a single step forward. One survived, he said quietly, but every word hit like a hammer. Now, you'll pay. Panic surged through Velk. He turned and ran, slipping on the cracked metal floor, barely escaping the vault before it fully opened behind him. Alarms from ancient systems buzzed faintly in the air, long dead but twitching back to life. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying with it the weight of something that had been waiting for centuries. Voss, once commander of Earth's Final Resistance Battalion, now awake in a ruined world, watched the alien disappear into the smoke and dust. He knew nothing of peace. He remembered the fire from the sky, the screams, the betrayal. He remembered watching Earth burn and hearing the last cries of his people. They had left him for dead, but he had not died. They had buried him in cold silence, but he had endured. For 300 years, his hatred had been frozen with him. Now, it burned again. Voss stepped out into the lightless surface, the broken sun casting dull shadows. His body ached, but his mind was sharp. He scavenged pieces of ruined armor, patched up his suit with fragments of Dominion tech, and found a half-functioning drone among the debris. Its AI core still blinked, recognizing him as a commander. That meant more systems might still work. He could rebuild. He could fight. He must. Somewhere above, the The Dominion would be alerted. They would send others, but they wouldn't be ready. They believed the war was over. They thought Earth had fallen completely. They were wrong. He moved through the ruins with purpose now, past the skeletons of skyscrapers, the rusted tanks, the shattered flags. Each step he took echoed through the empty world. He found a communications tower buried under rubble. With brute force, he pulled free the wreckage and powered the core. Static, then a flicker. The old systems were nearly dead, but not quite. Just enough left. He uploaded a simple message, piggybacked on an ancient frequency known only to Earth's allies. If any remained, to any who remember Earth, I live, and I remember everything. As the signal pulsed out into the blackness of space, Voss looked up. The stars hadn't changed, but he had. They would come. The Dominion, the others, maybe even survivors. He didn't care who came first. He would be waiting, far beyond the wreckage of Earth, on the frozen moons of Saturn. Life still stirred quietly in secret tunnels deep below. Titan's icy surface, where machines hummed and children played without knowing the true name of the blue world their ancestors once called home. But Sierra Lynn Noosh always knew the stories whispered in the dark, stories of Earth's fall. The fire that rained from the sky, and the man who was said to have never died. She had grown up in the shadows, born in a resistant cell that never believed the war had ended, and now, at 28, she stood in a dusty control room, staring at the message blinking across the console, repeating again and again in a voice older than any she'd ever heard. To any who remember Earth, I live, and I remember everything. Her heart froze as the words sank in. Only one man could have sent that message, Commander Elias Voss, the final sword of Earth. The last defender of the human race who was believed to have died during the fall of the last human command center on Earth centuries ago. Buried beneath fire and silence. But if this was true, he lived it, meant everything had changed. And before doubt could slow her, Sierra ran through the narrow tunnels to the council chamber, breathless, eyes wide, demanding they see it. But the elders only looked at her with tired expressions and skeptical eyes, whispering that it was impossible, that the signal could be a trap from the Dominion to smoke them out. Yet the oldest among the Melder Monroe, who had once flown a starfighter in the early days of the war, leaned forward with trembling hands and whispered, the voice, it's him. I'd know it anywhere. That was all Sierra needed. She returned to the command hub and sent her own signal, crypted through forgotten codes only a few still remembered. Reaching out across the stars with 4 words, Commander Voss, we hear. But as her signal left Titan, it also stirred attention in the Dominion's outer watch posts, where scanners picked up the strange pulse of human bandwidth not used in centuries, and deep in a command ship orbiting the edge of the solar system. A cold-eyed general, known as Varnock the Hollow, studied the data with growing alarm. He had read the old war reports, the ones they kept locked and hidden, the ones that said if Voss ever returned, nothing would stop the humans from rising again. So he ordered the immediate deployment of a scout killer drone toward Earth's orbit with one command erase, the anomaly. Meanwhile, back in the ruins of Earth, Voss crouched inside a crumbling communication station surrounded by scavenged tech, watching the old screens flicker with faint signs of life. And when Sierra's reply came through, he didn't smile, but his eyes burned brighter. Not with hope, but with certainty. The flame of resistance had not gone out, and now it had fuel. His body was weak, thinned by time and cryosleep, but his mind was sharper than ever. And as he limped through the ruins of what was once a great human defense bunker, he activated what systems he could, tainting one drone intact, its limbs broken, but its AI still functional, and with quick fingers, he fed it new instructions. locate salvageable weapons, seek ancient caches, and transmit locations to his datapad. Time was short. He didn't know how long before the Dominion reacted, but he knew they would not stay silent. As the days passed, Voss rebuilt his strength, trained with rusted weapons until his hands remembered every motion, every tactic, and used fragments of Dominion tech to forge something new, hybrid, efficient, and deadly. The Earth was a graveyard, but graves could be emptied. And even now, he was finding pieces of his old world beneath the Ashnam's faces, logs of soldiers, long gone. Echo, Red, his lost unit, appeared in flickering holograms, her final moments recorded in broken files, their sacrifices burned into his soul. He had failed them once. He would not fail again. Far above, the Dominion drone arrived in orbit, cloaked in darkness, scanning for the source of the message. It found him. It descended like a black blade through the clouds, targeting the bunker. Voss heard it before he saw it eat a low hum, unnatural, cold end when the ceiling exploded above him in a flash of fire and dust. He was already diving for cover, grabbing his weapon, rolling through rubble. The drone was fast, almost invisible, but he moved like a man who had fought death before and won. He used the wreckage, used the shadows, and when the drone fired, he ducked behind an ancient pillar, setting a trap with scavenged explosives, leading the machine in. It fell for it. The blast tore through its side, but it wasn't enough. It charged, blades spinning, and slammed into him. They crashed through a wall, metal and man, twisting in a dance of fury. But Voss, even weakened, was no ordinary man. He drove a shard of rebar into its core and yanked hard. The machine screamed, sparked, and fell. Breathing hard, blood dripping from a fresh wound in his side, he stood over the broken drone. He took its head and opened its data storage. Location logs, orders, transmission records. They knew they were coming. He looked to the stars, then to the cold earth below, and whispered, "Then let them come." Days later, on Titan, Sierra received a new message, shorter, encoded tighter than before. Earth stirs. Ready your people. War returns. And she did. She rallied fighters, born in silence, engineers raised by myths, children who had never seen the sun but knew how to hold a weapon. Across other hidden colonies, other survivors heard the call. The last of us humans who had hidden, scattered, and endured began to rise. The ghost of Earth had spoken, and the stars would tremble once more. Dark clouds hung over Earth like a memory refusing to fade. And in the deep hollow of the ancient military vaults, buried beneath the rubble of fallen cities, Commander Elias Voss stood at the edge of a sealed chamber that had not been opened in centuries. Its massive steel door untouched since the last day of the human resistance. Rust clung to the walls, and time had swallowed the air. But behind that door lay something more than history had held the sleepers. Those who had been wounded too deeply to fight, but too valuable to leave behind, placed in stasis during the final evacuation with the hope that someday someone would return for them, though no one ever did, until now. Voss had followed the Dominion drone's corrupted data trail to this bunker, Qua, once codenamed Vault Echo, and after bypassing a security system that barely recognized his DNA signature, Qua, he stared into the chamber as the lights flickered, on one by one, revealing rows of cryopods lined like tombstones, each glowing faintly with pale blue light, dust drifting in the still air like falling ash. He walked past faces frozen in time, men and women who had once been heroes, commanders, scientists, and soldiers whose names were etched into the last files of Earth's war logs, forgotten by everyone except him. Some pods were dark. Their inhabitants lost to time, but others still held life, weak but present, and Voss wasted no time. He reconnected emergency power from the remains of the drone he had destroyed, rerouted energy through cracked panels, and triggered the revival process on 6 pods marked High Clearance, Tier 1 Combat. The first pod hissed and released a cold fog into the air, and slowly, painfully, a figure inside stirred broad-shouldered, missing an eye, with a metal implant running along his spine. Voss recognized him immediately. Captain Derek Saul, once called the Iron Ghost by the Dominion during the siege of Neptune. Derek gasped awake, eyes wide, chest heaving, and when he saw Voss, his face twisted in disbelief. "They said you were dead," he croaked, voice raw. "I was," Voss replied. "Now we've both returned." One by one, the others woke Lyra. Kale, the stealth ops specialist who once infiltrated Dominion dreadnoughts. Dr. Marintesh, a tech savant whose mind had helped build Earth's most advanced AI systems. Sergeant Kov, a demolition expert with a cybernetic arm. Raya, a former medic turned soldier. And Holt, a quiet sniper who never missed a shot. Together, they looked at Voss with confusion, fear, and slowly, grim recognition. He told them that Truth Earth had fallen, the war had ended in fire, and humanity was believed extinct, but they had survived, scattered across moons and stations, hidden in shadows, and now the time had come to awaken them all. The room fell silent after he spoke, the old heroes staring at each other, realizing they were not relics, they were the spark. Okay, outside, the wind howled, and the stars beyond Earth's broken sky seemed to pulse with urgency. Voss shared with them the signal from Titan, Sarah Lynn's voice, proof that others were alive and listening, ready to rise. But he also showed them the Dominion drone's footage, proof that the enemy was watching, already reacting, already moving. They had little time. The group moved quickly, repairing what systems they could, scavenging weapons from the vaults, old armory, powering up training chambers to shake the sleep from their limbs and remind their bodies what war felt like. Dr. Tesh reactivated the AI interface of the vault, which identified itself as Argus, an old war advisor with fragmented memory but intact defense schematics. With Argus's help, they mapped out surviving bunkers buried across the planet, each possibly holding more sleepers. One, located beneath the ruins of the Antarctic command base, held thousands of pods. Voss's original final plan, long forgotten. But reaching it would not be easy. The Dominion had not been idle. From their orbiting dreadnoughts, they launched new hunter drones, sleeker, deadlier, built not just to destroy, but to erase all traces of resistance. The skies above Earth grew thick with dark wings. Meanwhile, Sarah Lynn on Titan had begun the Exodus Protocol, preparing ships and fighters for war. Her people ready to leave hiding and join the battle, but they needed a rally point. They needed Earth. Back in the bunker, Voss's team prepared for the march to the southern edge of the planet, where a transport aircraft buried in an old launch site might still be functional. It was a dangerous gamble, but they had no other choice. On the 5th night, under cover of darkness, they left Vault Echo and stepped into the wild remains of the world they had once sworn to protect. Cities had become forests of steel and vine, nature reclaiming what war had abandoned. They moved silently, avoiding drones, scavenging batteries, using flare rounds to signal others in hiding. Along the wood way, they found signs of life-hidden families, old rebels, children raised in silence, all looking at Voss and his team like ghosts returned from legends. They did not ask for loyalty. They earned it. Small groups joined them, armed with rusted weapons and fierce hope. The march became an army. As they neared the old launch site, the Dominion struck 500 drones in coordinated attack, cutting through the air like black thunder. The battle was brutal. Lyra Kale took down the first with an EMP mine. Cove rigged an explosive that took 2 more. And Holt brought down the 4th with a sniper shot from a collapsed tower. But the fifth drone nearly killed Voss, forcing Derek to throw himself into its path and slash through its core with a scavenged plasma blade. He survived, barely, but it reminded them all. The enemy was adapting. They reached the launch site by dawn. The hangar was half buried, its doors rusted shut, but inside, the old Earth's transport Tejas 9 still waited, remotely linked to the craft, brought its systems online, and with a groaning shudder, it powered up. They had their ship. Now they needed the rest of their people, As Voss and his team prepared for launch, a new signal came and scrambled, but clear enough. A voice, young and scared. "This is Vault Kappa. We heard your call. We have over 200 survivors. Please, help us." Voss looked out the cracked window at the rising sun. He thought of the Dominion tightening their grip, of the war that had burned everything, and of the names etched into every memory he carried. Then he spoke softly, with steel in his voice. "We're not done. We're just getting started." And with that, the Aegis 9 lifted from the earth, rising through the smoke and ruins, heading toward Vault Kappa. Beyond that was the greatest secret buried beneath the ice, where thousands still slept, waiting to awaken and take back what was stolen. The black sky above Earth cracked open as the Aegis 9 soared beyond the atmosphere, its old engines groaning under pressure, but still strong enough to carry Voss and his growing band of awakened warriors into space, toward the great silence that had once belonged to humanity, but was now controlled by the Dominion's iron grip. And as the world shrank below them, they all knew they were not just leaving the planet, they were entering the lion's den, flying straight into the void where enemy fleets watched every movement with eyes that never blinked. Behind them, Vault Kappa had been saved just in time. Its 200 survivors now packed tightly into auxiliary shuttles flying in formation with the Aegis. And each one of them, young or old, carried a weapon, a purpose, and a burning need to strike back. As they broke free of the upper atmosphere, warning lights flashed across the dashboard, proximity alarms. Movement ahead, and through the cracked glass of the forward window, they saw it, a Dominion cruiser, black and red, shaped like a knife pointed at Earth, slowly turning to intercept. It was smaller than the dreadnoughts, but far more dangerous. A warship designed for pursuit and annihilation, with plasma turrets and boarding pods built to tear ships apart and pull the survivors into screaming void. Voss leaned forward, eyes narrowed, as Argus spoke through the comms. "Stealth is no longer possible. They've seen us." The Dominion ship fired a warning beam, a bright red streak that passed close but didn't strike yet. Holt was already at the weapons station, his hands moving fast over controls older than most of the crew, activating the Aegis's forward guns and shielding systems, while Kav and Derek worked side by side to reroute energy from cargo decks into the core systems, and outside, the smaller shuttles, tucked in tight, trying to stay hidden behind the main ship's frame. Voss took the comm and spoke a single command across the channels: "Hold formation. We punch through, or we die trying." And then the first shot came, not a warning, but a plasma bolt straight for their starboard engine, shaking the entire ship, throwing some off their feet as fire and sparks rained down from exposed panels. Lyric Hale rushed to seal the damage, slipping through crawl spaces while the ship rocked again under a second hit, this time tearing through the hull of one of the rear shuttles, its oxygen tanks rupturing, its systems failing until Sierra lands. Voice crackled through the radio.com, but typed with urgency. "They're targeting the back of the line. We have to draw them forward." Voss responded instantly, ordering Holt to fire every forward cannon they had. And the space between ships lit up with sudden violence as red and blue streaks clashed in the dark, each shot a scream of survival. The Aegis 9 was older, weaker, but its crew were warriors, not machines. And they fought like it was their last breath. Each explosion shaking memories loose of Earth, of friends lost, of cities turned to ash. A bold move by Kov saved them momentarily. He redirected auxiliary batteries into a concentrated EMP burst that disabled the Dominion's forward turret, buying the Aegis enough time to angle hard left, a risky maneuver that brought them close to the cruiser's blind spot. But the Dominion adapted fast, launching 3 boarding pods toward the lead ship, each one spinning with deadly precision. Voss saw them on the scanner and didn't hesitate. He and Derek, armed up, grabbed their rifles and met the first boarding team in the main corridor, where the lights flickered and the air felt thin. The enemy soldiers weren't drones. They were Dominion elites. Tall and silent, armored in red plating, faces hidden behind smooth helmets. They moved like shadows with blades that shimmered with plasma energy. The clash was brutal, hand to hand, blood and sparks painting the walls as Voss fired point blank into the chest of one invader, while Derek used brute strength to slam another into a wall hard enough to crack metal. In the lower deck, Lyra and Raya defended the medbay, where wounded survivors from Val Kappa had been laid to rest. And when the second boarding pod struck, Raya didn't wait. She grabbed a shotgun from a wall rack and fired through the smoke, never blinking as the enemy fell. Meanwhile, Holt continued firing from the bridge, and Tesh, working alongside Argus, discovered an old system buried deep in the ship's AI, an ancient failsafe marked Vanguard Protocol. Voss gave her the nod, activated, across the entire Aegis. Old engines coughed back to life, redirecting all spare power into one focused forward burst. The ship jolted forward like a spear, slamming into the side of the Dominion cruiser. Not hard enough to destroy it, but just enough to scrape past and send both ships into a violent spin that tore the boarding tethers and flung enemy troops into open space. The shuttles followed, barely dodging the spinning wrecks. For a moment, there was silence. Then Argus announced, "We're through." The Dominion ship drifted behind them, damaged, trailing fire, but not destroyed. And Voss knew it wouldn't be the last. This was only the beginning. They entered deeper space, toward the Titan relay, where Syrah waited with the main resistance fleet. Everyone aboard the Aegis 9 looked at each other differently, not just as survivors, but as soldiers again. They had faced the Dominion head-on in the cold dark, and they had survived. Syrah's fleet was already on the move when they arrived. A dozen modified civilian ships armed to the teeth, fighters swarming around like bees. And when she saw Voss walk off the ramp, covered in blood and ash, she didn't salute. She hugged him, briefly. Then she pulled him aside. "We've got a problem," she said. "We picked up chatter. The Dominion knows what we're doing. They've sent the Dread Reaper." Voss froze. That name was no myth. The Reaper was not a ship. It was a floating fortress, a weapon of war used only when Dominion control was threatened. And if it was coming, it meant the enemy believed the human spirit was rising again. And they were right. In the command center of the Aegis, Voss stood before the fleet's officers, his voice steady and clear. "We don't run. We don't hide. We fight. They took Earth from us, and now they want to finish what they started. But we're not dead. We're fire. And now we burn back." Around him, soldiers, anew, tired, and ready, nodded, eyes burning with something stronger than fear, rage, hope, unity. In the distance, deep in the tight, in the black sea of space, a shape appeared on their scanners, too large to measure, moving with the silence of death itself. The Reaper had arrived, and this time the void would burn. The Reaper loomed in the dark like a monster carved from nightmares. Its size so massive that it blocked out stars and made even the largest human ships look like toys. And as the Resistance fleet floated in, silence before it, everyone on board knew this was no ordinary battle. They had entered the mouth of death itself. Voss stood on the bridge of Aegis 9, his jaws set, eyes locked on the glowing shape ahead. A fortress built for one purpose, annihilation, and deep within its core, buried behind layers of Dominion armor, lay something older than any ship, something no human had ever seen, something Argus now called the Reckoning Engine. Argus had discovered its existence only moments before they arrived, in the encrypted signals bouncing off the Reaper's hull. An ancient Dominion construct designed to rewrite space around it, to collapse resistance fleets without firing a shot by ripping them apart with gravitational waves and controlled dark energy. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a god killer, and the Dominion had kept it secret until now. The silence across the fleet was thick with fear as Cyril Len's voice cut through the comms. Calm, but urgent. We have one chance. If that engine charges, we're finished. We hit it before it powers up. No retreat. Voss looked around at his crew, Derek tightening his armor, Lyra loading her weapons, Tesh already digging into schematics of the Reaper's interior systems, Holt staring through his scope, already picking weak spots, and then gave the only order that made sense. Prepare to board. The fleet scattered, smaller ships drawing fire from the Reaper's outer guns, while Aegis 9, carrying the original team, slipped through the chaos and aimed for a breach point along the Reaper's underbelly, where a damaged hangar vent pulsed. With faint heat, Tesh's scans had shown that as the only viable access tunnel to the inner core, and it would only remain open for 2 minutes. They hit it hard, bursting through with sparks and smoke, landing rough inside the Reaper with fire trailing behind them. And immediately, alarms began to echo across the giant ship's interior, red lights blinking, automated voices speaking in the Dominion's cold mechanical tongue. Inside the Reaper, the air was different then, charged with strange pressure that made skin crawl. The corridors were clean, black, pulsing with a dim red light, as if the walls were alive. The team split fast, Tesh and Raya heading toward the central conduit to sabotage the core shield, while Voss, Derek, Lyra, and Holt moved toward the engine chamber, their weapons drawn, steps silent. They encountered resistance fast. Dominion guards appeared like ghosts, their armor smooth and silent, their weapons not guns but energy spears that crackled with light. The fights were quick, violent, full of blood and fire. Lyra danced between enemies like a shadow, knives flashing, while Derek took hits that would kill any normal man and kept moving forward, rage in his veins. Voss led them with sharp eyes, always watching, always one step ahead, and Holt never missed his shots, echoing like thunder in the metal halls. Meanwhile, Tesh and Raya reached the shield generator, only to find it guarded by something new, a creature, not machine or man, but a mix of both. Floating above the floor, arms outstretched, its face covered by a veil of static, and it spoke, without words, filling their minds with pain. Tesh almost dropped, but Raya fired into it without hesitation, her bullets doing nothing until Tesh, shaking off the pressure, overloaded his scanner and used its pulse to disrupt the creature's form, causing it to shriek and dissolve into white sparks. They activated the overload sequence on the shield generator and sent the signal. Voss's team reached the Reckoning Engine moments later. It sat in a wide chamber like a heart made of fire and light, suspended in midair, turning slowly, humming, with a low sound that made teeth ache. And as they approached, the room began to shift, walls folding back, revealing more of the mechanism. Glowing veins of energy running into the floor and ceiling. Argus, speaking in Voss's ear, warned, "It's awakening. You must destroy this stabilization node, or it will activate fully." They located the node at the far end of the chamber, guarded by heavy turrets and another wave of elites. These ones faster, smarter, communicating with each other in near silence. The battle was brutal. Lyra was hit twice, but kept going, using smoke grenades and mirrors to distract Akarnd. Derek covered Voss with his body, shielding him as they crossed open ground. Holt climbed a broken scaffold and rained fire from above. Voss reached the node, pulled out the plasma charges, and began setting them when the chamber itself began to tremble. The engine was fighting back. Lights flashed violently. Gravity shifted in sudden bursts. And parts of the floor began floating into the air as if reality was breaking. Argus screamed into the cum. Now, now, now. And Voss slammed the last charge into place, punched the remote detonator, and shouted, "Clear." They dove for cover as the node exploded in white fire, and the reckoning engine gave a strange, crying electronic screech that echoed across the Reaper. Then the light dimmed, the humming slowed, and the energy veins faded to gray. It wasn't dead, but it was broken. The Reaper shuddered above the battlefield, its weapons falling silent, systems glitching as the fleet outside saw their chance. Syrah's voice shouted over the open cum, "All ships now, hit it with everything." And the sky lit up as the resistance launched wave after wave of fire into the crippled monster. Inside, Voss's team ran, alarms blaring, corridors shaking as secondary explosions rocked the ship. They barely reached Aegis 9 before a fireball tore through the hangar behind them. Kaish and Raya had already returned, wounded but alive, and Holt helped Lyra limp aboard as Derek collapsed near the ramp, breathing hard but smiling. Voss was the last on, shouting for liftoff. They pulled away just as the Reaper began to split down the center, fire pouring from its engine, systems collapsing in on themselves, and the last image they saw before the explosion was the engine, spinning faster and faster until it vanished in a sphere of white light. The blast wave followed, and the fleet turned hard to escape. Ships tossed like leaves on the wind, some damaged, some destroyed, but most survived, and when the light faded, the Reaper was gone. Silence fell again. Not fear, this time. Victory. On the Aegis, the crew sat in silence for a long moment, breathing, bleeding, staring at the empty space where the Dominion's most powerful weapon had once existed. Voss stood slowly, looked at them all, and nodded once. "Still here," he said. "And now they know." Across the Resistance fleet, cheers erupted, fists raised, tears falling. They had done the impossible. But as they regrouped, Argus gave one last warning. The Reaper is not the end. The Dominion will strike again. This was their sword. Their shield remains. Voss looked out the window into the stars, his expression hard. "Then we find it. We finish this." And deep in the heart of Dominion space, far from the ashes of Earth and the wreckage of the Reaper, a signal pulsed through. The void, cold, ancient, and waiting. The stars were quiet now, but it was the kind of silence that never lasted long, the kind that held its breath before a storm, and Voss knew it too well to be fooled, though the Reaper was gone and the reckoning engine destroyed. The Dominion still lived, deeper in the dark, gathering, hurting, and ready to strike again. Earth was still dead, but not forgotten. And as the Resistance fleet drifted near the ruins of Mars Station, now a forward base, a new message came through Argus. One that chilled the blood of everyone who heard it. Not words, not noise, but a signal that matched no known pattern except one, the frequency once used by Earth's final defense grid before it fell. And that grid, according to every record, had been offline for 2 centuries. But now it was speaking, and the signal was coming from deep within the hollow zone. A cursed place where gravity was warped and light bent the wrong way, and where no ship returned, not even Dominion scouts. All stood on the bridge of Aegis 9, worn and scarred, with Derek beside him, arm in a sling, but eyes sharp. And Tesh pacing, eyes locked on her screen, trying to decode the signal's strange rhythm. They weren't alone. Now Syrah Len's fleet had doubled in size since the battle with the Reaper. New survivors, joining from broken colonies, old captains returning from hiding, each with a reason to fight. And though their ships were patched together, they had heart, and that was something no Dominion AI could ever match. The Council of Captains voted quickly investigate the Hollow Zone, find the source, and finish what began centuries ago. Voss accepted, knowing this mission could be their last. The fleet approached the zone slowly. Scanners, blind, signals, scattered, stars stretching like rivers around them as space bent. And then it happened. Single human voice broke through the static, old and faint, but clear. If you can hear this, Earth remembers, Earth lives. Gasps echoed through the ships, some believing, others doubting. But Voss didn't hesitate. He pushed forward into the storm, where black lightning streaked across the void and strange shapes moved in the dark shadows, too large to be real, too fast to be explained. One ship vanished before their eyes, swallowed by a silent wave of distortion. But still they pressed on, till they reached the eye of the zone, and there it was, a station the size of a moon, hidden behind a shell-folded space, covered in ancient earth markings, its outer shell cracked, but still breathing power, and on its side, barely visible, the words, Project Genesis. Tesh whispered the name like a ghost's memory. The last Ark, she said. They were supposed to build one before Earth fell. But everyone thought it failed. It hadn't. As they approached, docking systems activated automatically, recognizing their ships, and hatches opened with quiet hisses, like the station itself had waited patiently for centuries. Voss, Derek, Tesh, Lyra, and Syrah led the first team inside, moving carefully through long, dim corridors covered in dust, vines, and strange markings that looked like human language mixed with something new. Then came the shock. People, hundreds, maybe thousands still alive, frozen in stasis chambers lining the walls, faces peaceful, unchanged by time. Cryogenic Ark, Syrah muttered. They saved the last ones. But the joy was brief, because Argus suddenly spoke with urgency, warning that something else had awakened, a Dominion virus, buried deep in the station systems, waiting for contact, now spreading like fire through the network, corrupting controls, disabling locks, and activating old defenses not meant for enemies, but for traitors. Turrets descended from ceilings, drones unfolded from walls, and doors slammed shut, splitting the team. Voss and Tesh were trapped near the main core. Derek and Lyra locked in a lower sector with the power grid, and Syrah surrounded near the medical bay, where she found something worse: Dominion scouts already inside. Machines disguised as humans, sleeper units that had been here for years, waiting to finish the job. A fight broke out across the station, chaos erupting in cold halls once meant to preserve life. Voss and Tesh made for the core, dodging fire, trying to reach the command center where the stasis systems could be protected. Tesh worked fast, bypassing corrupted data, fighting the Dominion virus with old Earth code she barely remembered, while Voss held the door, his rifle running hot, his mind full of rage and fire. Derek, in the lower levels, ripped through enemy drones with bare hands and metal pipes after his gun jammed, while Lyra hacked the emergency conduit, rerouting power to give Tesh a chance. Above, Syrah fought like a storm, leading survivors who'd woken too soon. Barely armed, but full of fire, they fought with tools, with fists, with everything they had, and they didn't back down. Slowly, through pain and blood, the tide began to turn. Tesh broke through the virus's final wall, locking it in a digital cage, then activated the Genesis core, waking the station fully for the first time in 200 years. Lights returned, systems stabilized, and the stasis chambers began to open, one by one, revealing engineers, soldiers, scientists, the last minds of Earth. One woman stepped forward, her name forgotten to history, but her presence like a beacon, and she looked at Voss with wide eyes. "How long?" she asked softly. "Long enough," he answered. "But we're still here." News spread fast across the station, across the fleet, across the scattered networks of survivors still hiding in deep space that Earth had not truly died. The Ark was real. Humanity's heart had survived. The Dominion, sensing this shift, sent their final command, purged the Hollow Zone, but it was too late. The Resistance had already awakened the Ark's defense, griddled Earth weapons forgotten by time, orbiting satellites armed with kinetic strikes, particle beams, and one last weapon, never fired before, the Lance of Dawn, a solar cannon buried in the Ark's spine, charged by the energy of dying stars. The Dominion fleet arrived with fire and fury, but the Resistance didn't flinch. That battle was like nothing they'd seen, ships exploding in clusters, drones swarming like wasps, light and shadow crashing in endless waves. But now, humanity had something else: purpose, memory, and the will of those who remembered Earth. The lance fired once. A beam of golden light cut through the darkness, slicing the Dominion command ship in half, sending shockwaves through their fleet. One by one, the enemy fell. Some fled, some self-destructed. Silence returned, this time not waiting for a storm, but for rebuilding. Voss stood in the Ark's heart, surrounded by those who had fought and those who had slept. And as the stars burned quietly outside, he spoke words that echoed through every ship, every survivor, every broken world, waiting for hope. They thought we were gone. They buried our world. But Earth never died. It waited. It remembered. And now we rise across the galaxy. The message spread. We remember Earth, and with that memory, they began again as scattered survivors, but as a people united with fire in their blood, stars in their eyes, and the courage to claim the future stolen from them so long ago.